Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our regularly scheduled preliminary budget meeting, November 21st, 2022, 7 p.m. Mr. Berman?
Commissioner Gondek.
Present.
Commissioner Forresty Grubb.
Here.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Here.
Cavender.
Here.
Commissioner Quinn.
Here.
Commissioner Hart. Here. Commissioner Wexler.
Here.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Here.
And Commissioner Holmes.
Here. Chief?
The flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
As I indicated at the start of the meeting, tonight is Haverford Township Board of Commissioners preliminary budget meeting. We will be adopting a preliminary budget this evening and then considering a final adoption of this budget at our regularly scheduled December 12th meeting. It is now time on the agenda to invite the input of any citizens here who have any questions or comments on the sole agenda item, which is our budget, and then to ancillary matters, the sewer rental charge and the trash fee. Is there anybody on the left side of the audience who'd like to say anything tonight? Is there anybody on the right side of the audience who'd like to say anything tonight? Hearing none, we will now move to the budget hearing and preliminary adoption of the year 2023 budget. I will entertain any motion.
President,
Mr. McCluskey.
motion to adopt as an ordinance a preliminary general fund, sewer fund, and capital fund budget, including all taxes, fees, service charges, and other revenue sources provided within all funds for 2023.
I have a motion and a second, and I do believe next on my agenda is a presentation by Mr. Berman, our township manager, before we vote on this budget.
Commissioners, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to present the proposed 2023 operating budget and four-year capital improvement plan for Haverford Township. During this presentation, we'll discuss the township's goals and objectives, we'll highlight key economic factors affecting the budget, and we'll provide a summary of the proposed budget. We'll recommend an economically feasible solution to balance the budget, and we'll tell you about the challenges that lie ahead. Tonight, we present the proposed budget publicly and ask the board to review it, make any adjustments you feel may be necessary, and adopt a preliminary budget. The entire budget, including any adjustments, will be published on the township's website following this meeting, likely at some point tomorrow morning. Likewise, this meeting will be available on YouTube, and the PowerPoint presentation I'm about to give will also be available on our website. A hearing will take place on December 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. in this room, where interested citizens may express their views on the preliminary budget. At the conclusion of that hearing, the board will be asked to adopt a final budget with any amendments the board considers to be advisable. So the budget isn't just a bunch of numbers, it's the culmination of a lengthy process that begins in August of each year with discussions among department heads, volunteer boards and commissions, and of course, commissioners. The proposed budget represents our interpretation of the goals and objectives of this board. Before going any further, I'd like to thank our Assistant Township Manager and Finance Director, Amy Cuthbertson, who led this budget process, which has been a little different this year with several newer commissioners. I'd also like to thank Commissioner McCluskey, who provided valuable guidance and consistency as chair of the Finance Committee. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce the members of our leadership team here at the township. When I say leadership team, I'm referring to those employees who attended COVID-19 staff meetings and helped guide the township through the pandemic, and most of them have worked for the township for quite a few years. So we have Dan Mariani, who's our Director of Public Works. We have Steve Poole, who is our Deputy Code Enforcement Officer and Chief Fire Code Official. We have Joe Celia, who is our Director of Code Enforcement. We have Jim McCanns, who's our Chief of Paramedics. We have Brian Barrett, who's the Director of Parks and Recreation. Chief Viola is here of the Police Department. Of course, Amy is here. And there are a number of other employees who are part of our leadership team who are not with us this evening. And they represent so many employees who work for the township and are dedicated to serving this community. In fact, there are hundreds more full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees who are just as dedicated to this community as the rest of us are. They work very hard to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents and businesses and institutions here in Haverford Township. So as a unit of local government, Haverford Township uses fund accounting to track transactions that are assigned to particular purposes. The general fund is the township's primary operating fund. It accounts for all financial resources of the general government, except those required to be accounted for in another fund. The ARPA fund accounts for federal funds received through the American Rescue Plan Act and the related expenditure of those funds. The sewer fund accounts for the sewage and wastewater service operations and is intended to be self-supporting through user charges. The Capital Projects Fund accounts for financial resources used to acquire or construct major capital projects. The revenue in this fund comes from a variety of sources, including the sale of existing assets, non-recurring business audit revenues, issuance of long-term debt, and capital appropriations from the general fund, just to name a few. So we're aware, of course, that many of our residents, businesses, institutions face serious financial challenges. Like you, township employees dealt with the countywide reassessment, the global pandemic, and now exceptionally high levels of inflation. Simply put, the goal of this budget is to provide adequate resources to deliver the level of services our residents have come to expect and to accomplish future goals and objectives of the Board of Commissioners. We present an ambitious capital program that involves debt issuance in early 2023 to fund the library renovation and expansion project, stadium improvements, and new emergency apparatus. We present an equally ambitious spending plan for the federal funds received through the American Rescue Plan Act. As we attempt to implement these programs, we face the same supply chain and labor challenges as private industry, yet we continue to work as hard as possible to make Haverford Township a special place in which to live and work. So here's the spoiler alert. The proposed budget does include a 1.8% increase in the township's real estate tax millage, following no increase in 2021 or 2022. For reference, the last real estate tax increase was just 1.5%, and that was in 2020. The proposed budget as presented includes no changes to the sewer rent, which is $4.65 per 1,000 gallons of water used, and no change to the trash and recycling fee, which is $275 per residential unit. However, recent trends that we'll discuss in greater detail later in this presentation suggest that we should discuss the trash and recycling fee in greater detail. So facing the long-term financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, exceptionally high inflation and volatility in energy and fuel, many local governments have decided to use reserves to make up for revenue shortfalls and to support ongoing activities. While reserves are a viable source for governments and designed to be used for situations like this, we are mindful that the use of reserves should support isolated events, such as the rare combination of circumstances in the world today. Therefore, we feel the use of fund balance coupled with the nominal tax increase just described is a prudent plan to balance the 2023 general fund budget. The proposed budget includes a planned draw, therefore, of $1.5 million from fund balance, which will still leave the township in a very healthy financial position and allow us to mitigate the financial burden on those who own property in Haverford Township. We believe this action will enable us to continue providing the wide array of services our residents have come to expect, while maintaining our Moody's AAA bond rating. This rating is important because it is a key factor in determining the interest rate we pay when issuing debt, which again we plan to do in early 2023. So I want to talk about property taxes in general for a moment. There are three entities that rely on property taxes as a key source of funding here in Haverford Township. That's Delaware County, the Haverford Township School District, and Haverford Township itself. Each taxing authority, the county, school district, and township, determine their own property tax rate or millage. The combination of assessed value and millage determines how much tax each property owner will pay to each taxing authority. The chart you're looking at now simply shows that the school district captures the lion's share of the property tax in Haverford Township, with the county and township collecting far less than the school district. This model is fairly common throughout Pennsylvania. The proposed $49.1 million general fund budget provides resources for all municipal operations other than sanitary sewer. This includes finance and administration, tax collection, police, fire, EMS, public shade trees, code enforcement, highway maintenance, curbside leaf removal, streetlights, traffic signals, snow removal, park maintenance, recreation programming, stadium operations, and debt service. Overall, our 2023 general fund revenue budget reflects a 4% increase over that of 2022. As you might expect, the proposed general fund expense budget represents a 4% increase over 2022 as well. Given the current economic conditions, I'm actually very pleased that the increase was not higher. Again, we have Assistant Township Manager and Finance Director Amy Cuthbertson to thank for pulling this all together. As you might imagine, personnel costs, wages, health benefits, pension benefits, workers' compensation, payroll taxes, they represent about 64.5% of our budget. This is not uncommon in local government, as people are at the core of the services we provide. Our labor contracts call for a 3.75% and 3.25% wage increase, respectively, for the civilian and police collective bargaining groups. The police contract expires in the end of 2023, so our negotiations for a new contract will begin sometime mid-year. In terms of health benefits, our healthcare consortium secured a 0% increase in our health care premiums for this year. Again, we've experienced these 0% increases for 6 consecutive years now. For our pension plans, 2023 marks an official valuation year. Although we enjoyed double-digit increases in our pension plans during 2020 and 2021, we fully expect a double-digit loss in 2022, which will impact our funding levels. Fortunately, the township's 2023 minimum municipal obligation is still governed by the 2021 valuation, and therefore we saw only a modest increase in the proposed contribution this year. The proposed budget includes funding for 2 additional full-time positions, partially offset by the consolidation of existing part-time positions. If approved, the new positions will be designed to handle some of the sustainability functions outlined in the Climate Action Plan, along with grant management and communications. In addition, the positions will assist us in succession planning, as many of our employees approach retirement age. Filling these positions now will allow new employees to be trained before we lose our current employees through natural attrition. Although the details of these positions have yet to be completely worked out, you'll see some line items increasing to reflect those costs. The proposed budget also includes an additional part-time employee to support our facilities. We continue to experience significant volatility in fuel, vehicle maintenance, and salt for snow removal, and we have budgeted accordingly in those areas. Also included in the general fund budget are several pieces of equipment for public works and parks maintenance, including a new sanitation truck, 2 additional electric vehicles, 1 for parking within the police department and 1 for the Parks and Recreation Department, and 4 new police vehicles. The operating budget includes a 3% increase for library operations and the same 3% increase for each of the 5 volunteer fire companies that serve our community. The budget also includes wage rate increases for part-time and seasonal workers in both Public Works and Parks Maintenance to help make those positions more competitive in today's labor market. In addition, based on feedback from residents and commissioners alike, we have included 2 additional full-time positions in Parks Maintenance. While this won't make our parks impeccable, it will certainly improve things like grass cutting and the frequency of cutting during spring, playing field maintenance, and installation of new playground equipment to replace older, worn-out pieces. We also expect to see significant increases in energy costs. As you probably know, the price of energy has risen dramatically across the globe. The increased energy costs will be largely offset by savings realized through the completion of our obligation under the Constellation EME program, which financed the initial phases of the LED streetlight work. For the next 2 years, we will participate in the Municipal Utility Alliance through the Pennsylvania Municipal League for 100% renewable power generation. Additionally, by purchasing clean and renewable energy, the township will achieve its pledge for 100% clean and renewable electricity many years before our commitment. You'll see a spike in skating expenditures, and we believe that is due to a combination of the naturally high demand for energy and the 24-hour nature of that operation. Borrowing costs and debt service will depend largely on the final course of action determined by the Board of Commissioners in terms of capital projects, including the library and stadium renovation projects. For the proposed budget, we have included additional debt service for a $26 million borrowing in early 2023. Any changes in the scale of these or other construction projects, if approved, would lead to additional debt service in 2023 and future years. So on the screen, you'll now see a summary of general fund expenditure categories. We group together public safety, which is police, fire, EMS, community development, and emergency management. We also group together some auxiliary service, like library, historic property, shade tree, and Haverford Township Day. I'd like to talk for a few minutes about the staffing levels in our departments and some of the work that is performed. As an example, you'll see on the screen in front of you that we, in code enforcement, have 4 full-time inspectors, 2 administrative full-time employees, and 2 administrative part-time employees. We also support those employees with 1 third-party inspector. In 2021, that department issued 4,899 permits. In 2022 so far, we've issued 3,206 permits. Likewise, we have issued 810 rental licenses. The point is, we have a relatively lean staff, actually a very lean staff, considering the volume of work that goes on in that department. Similarly, in the police department, we have 70 sworn officers and a number of other positions. Those 70 sworn officers responded to 47,353 calls for service in 2020. That was a slow year because of the pandemic. But in each of the succeeding years, 2021, they responded to over 60,000 calls for service, and we'll probably hit that number again in 2022. In Public Works, as another example, consider we have 25 full-time sanitation employees and about 15 permanent part-time employees in sanitation. And they collect 17,000 tons of trash every year and 4,000 tons of recycling. In addition to that, they collect 4,400 tons of brush with the weekly collection. It's just amazing how much work they get done. Further, our highway department, which includes several sub-departments, handles our roads, 124 miles of township roads, And they perform some snow removal on some of the state roads in the township. They go through about 2,800 tons of salt during a given year. The sewer department, which is only 5 full-time employees, is responsible for maintaining both our storm sewers and our sanitary sewers. And they maintain roughly 2,278 stormwater inlets in the township and over 149 miles of underground sanitary sewer pipes. In Parks and Recreation, we have, what do we have there? 16 full-time employees handling 570 acres of parkland and open space, 33 baseball fields, 11 soccer and football fields, 18 pickleball courts, 17 tennis courts, 15 basketball courts, the skate park, 21 playgrounds, 9 pavilions. And in addition to handling all of the grass cutting on those properties, they also handle grass cutting on the Darby Road median, the Westchester Pike median, the Pensy Trail, and the Darby Creek Trail. Finally, they handle snow shoveling around our parks and plowing of Parkview Drive, the area around the Creek, and shoveling our bridges at Eagle, Ardmore, and Buck. You know, there are other departments in the township that I haven't quite quantified the services that are provided, but think about our community development, which is only 2 employees who administer all of our zoning permits, the zoning hearing board, the planning commission, and the entire comprehensive plan process, not to mention our human resources group, which is under finance, which handles all of the activities that are required to support all of these employees. So I just wanted to convey that information to the board so you're aware of how we provide our services and what's involved. Moving on. Borrowing costs and debt service, again, will depend largely on the final course of action determined by the board early next year. For planning and budget purposes, we've included $26 million in early 2023, and any changes, again, will impact debt service and borrowing costs next year and debt service in future years. Moving on to trash and recycling, you'll recall that I mentioned I wanted to discuss that a little bit further. When we prepared the budget initially, we did not include an increase to the trash and recycling fee, but we did give some thought to leaving that as an open item for further discussion. There are 3 major components that drive the trash and recycling fee. We have the tonnage or the tipping fee by the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority, the recycling rate that we pay to Republic Services, and our internal policy that is relatively informal, but we try to keep cost recovery between 80 and 85% through our annual fee. So our initial proposed budget included a $90 average recycling tonnage rate from Republic, an $82 trash tipping fee from the Delaware County Solid Waste Authority, and under those assumptions, no increase was necessary. However, the recycling market, which is typically cyclical and moves up and down throughout the year, has remained high for the past 3 months and is currently exceeding $130 per ton. Earlier this month, Public Works contacted Republic for some insights regarding future rates, and Republic indicated their opinion that rates would remain very high for the foreseeable future. So based on the combination of the increased recycling fees charged by Republic, which is where the majority of municipalities take their recycling in this area, the impact on our recycling budget is $133,000. And so again, because of that incredibly high price for recycling, our budget is going to be short, in the absence of any further action, about $133,000. So we're presenting 3 options for the board to consider to fill that gap. The board could choose option 1, which would be an increased property tax over and above the recommended 1.8%. The board could consider option number 2, which would increase the trash and recycling fee for all 16,000 users of our services, or the board could choose option 3, which would be to take a harder look at some of our other general fund revenue lines for areas that might be trending higher at this point in the year. Under option 1, the increase in property taxes would go from 1.8% to 2.4%. Under option 2, the fee would increase by $8 from $275 per year per customer to $283 per year per customer. If option 3 is successful, there would be no impact to residents, but if we didn't succeed in achieving the higher revenue goals in those other line items, we would be A, non-compliant with our long-standing policy of 80 to 85% cost recovery, and we could sustain additional losses beyond that, which we could result in a deficit spending for solid waste services next year. So we'll discuss that a little bit later when the board has the opportunity to offer their comments. Moving on to the sewer revenue fund, sewer rents charged to all properties on public sewer are the largest revenue generator of this fund at approximately $4.5 million. Our sewer rents are based on the water consumption as supplied to us by Aqua PA for the period October 1, 2021 through September 30, 2022. In terms of expenditures, the largest expenses in the sewer fund are payments to Radnor-Haverford-Marple Sewer Authority and Upper Darby Township for sewage processing through Delcora and the City of Philadelphia systems. Township personnel costs represent a much smaller fraction of the sewer operating fund budget. In recent years, we have observed a consistent decrease in water consumption here in Haverford Township. While this is generally good for the environment, reduced water consumption does not translate directly into reduced cost for sewage conveyance and treatment. This is largely due to the inflow and infiltration of clear water into our sewer system and the needless processing and treatment of clear water. For this reason, the board may wish to examine our sewer rate structure in the future to determine whether another methodology, such as a flat rate, is more appropriate. So, a brief discussion on the use of sewer fund reserves. When is it appropriate to use sewer fund reserves? When additional funds are needed to respond to a crisis or emergency, when additional funds are needed to address unanticipated short-term revenue shortfalls, to stabilize rate increases in unusual times. Those are opportunities that might be ideal for using sewer reserve funds. However, this year, for 2023, we're proposing no planned use of sewer reserve funds. Capital Project Fund accounts for financial resources used to acquire or construct major capital projects. The revenue in this fund comes from a variety of sources, including the sales of existing assets, non-recurring business audit revenues, issuance of long-term debt, and capital appropriations from the general fund, just to name a few. In 2023, we resumed the practice of an annual $100,000 transfer from the general fund for the upkeep of historic properties. And as I've stated a number of times in this presentation, we are assuming a $26 million borrowing in early 2023. Some of the capital projects that would not be funded by the ARPA fund, which we'll discuss in a short time. So these are just capital fund projects, include another electric vehicle charging station at the CREC, Welcome to Haverford signage at major entryways to the township, final bid documents and installation of solar panels, stadium improvements, such as the electric ice resurfacer, cooling tower replacement, and beginning the design on locker room renovations. Of course, the library and renovation and the library renovation and expansion project, historical asset requests for Niter Hall and the Grange Estate, upgrade to some of the decorative street lighting in the township, most of which is, I believe, in the 3rd and the 9th Ward, which were not part of the original LED project. Continuation of the Pensy Trail project, which, according to my last update from PennDOT, is scheduled to be bid late this year or early in 2023. Continuation of Caracong, of the Caracong SEPTA parking project. That's the grant-funded project to install a parking lot at Mill Road and Caracong Drive, and various equipment, including 2 additional electric vehicles. Moving on now to the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. So this is a separate fund that we maintain apart from general or sewer or capital project funds. It accounts for monies that have been received, that's $19.8 million, and spent on allowable expenditures under the American Rescue Plan Act. Those allowable expenditures include responding to the public health emergency, responding to the negative economic impacts of the health emergency, providing premium payments to essential workers, making investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, replenishing public sector revenue losses. And throughout the guidance from the Department of the Treasury, the emphasis is on services to disproportionately impacted communities. The funds in the American Rescue Plan Act must be allocated or committed by December 31st, 2024, and fully spent by December 31st, 2026. So we're frequently asked, what have we spent so far? What have we done? And now I'm going to go through a number of projects that have been awarded or completed through November 14th, 2022. First of all, in August 2022, the Board of Commissioners, is that 22 or 21? I think that might be 21, Amy. August 21, the Board of Commissioners adopted an original spending plan, and it is shown on the screen in the front of the room. The total spent so far is approximately $2 million. In the category of public health emergency, we've committed to spending money on the Caracong Field lights, the sidewalk project along Township Line Road near Farwood and the SEPTA station, the HVAC system replacement with air purification in the Public Works building, picnic tables at various parks, an open house for the senior population, Freedom Playground renovations, Paddock Park playground equipment and message board, Richland Park playground equipment, Powder Mill Park playground equipment, Grange Park pickleball and tennis courts. In responding to the negative economic impacts, the board has approved and we've administered the Back to Business grants, which were awarded to 97 local businesses. We've conducted 2 local job fairs administered by Discover Haverford at the CREC. We've awarded grants to nonprofits serving our senior population. We've awarded grants under the Facade Improvement Program, again administered by Discover Haverford, and awarded to 13 local businesses with still more to come. The Darby Road Streetscapes Project, Phase 3. A 2-year financial commitment to Discover Haverford for business district beautification. A 2-year financial commitment to Discover Haverford to fund additional economic development staff. The premium pay for essential workers category included premium payments to Public Works employees and other first responders, as well as premium payments to volunteer firefighters. In the category of investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, we conducted several storm sewer replacement projects, and we've initiated the design of the conversion of a basin along Raymond Drive at Glendale Road to turn it into a bio-retention basin. To date, again, we've spent approximately $2 million with $17.8 million remaining to be allocated and spent before the end of 2026. So planned projects for 2023. Continued playground equipment replacement and park enhancements, including development of Brookline Park and trail extensions. New constituent assistance, code enforcement, community development, and public works management software. Again, the Darby Road Streetscape Phase 3 project, East Hathaway Lane bus route beautification, tree planting along Westchester Pike Business Corridor, a startup program for WMBE, that's Women and Minority-Owned Business Enterprises, mental health initiatives, senior initiatives, round 2, a senior economic recovery program, law enforcement report writing software, neighborhood traffic and pedestrian studies, stormwater management initiatives, new and innovative leaf collection equipment, design work for infrastructure improvements at the public work facility. So, as we wrap up the discussion and prepare to answer your questions, I will remind everyone that a hearing will take place on December 12th at 7 p.m. in this room. At the conclusion of that hearing, the board will be asked to adopt a final budget with any amendments the board considers to be advisable. Again, I'd like to thank Amy Cuthbertson for putting this whole thing together, and we would be glad to answer any questions at this time.
Mr. Township Manager, thank you. Thank you, Assistant Township Manager Cuthbertson. And thank you to all the department heads who followed our calendar and guidelines and rules and presented all their needs and details to our staff to put this budget together. I open the floor to my colleagues. Does anybody have any question or comment for Mr. Berman or for any of us?
I would just want to put out there a personal thank you to Mr. Berman, Ms. Cuthbertson, and all the other department heads. Having received this, preliminary budget and gone over it page by page and reviewed it, it did generate a lot of questions by me, but they have spent not only countless hours putting together these documents and this information for us to digest, but also spend just as many hours answering my questions, and I'm sure the questions of the other members of the board. So I don't really have any questions at this point on the budget that haven't already been answered, but just want to say a special thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gondik. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Commissioner McCluskey?
I would also echo the appreciation for Ms. Cuthbertson and Mr. Berman and all the department heads. And I think the outline sort of shows how much effort goes into running this township and the people that do it on a daily basis, that work in this building, that work at the public yards lot, that work in the police department. And it, I think when you see it in this form that we get, it leads to an appreciation of everyone who does a lot of good work to make the 9 of us who come here a couple times a month and look pretty good. So thanks for that. And if nobody else has questions, I do think I would just raise the issue of the trash issue and the increased in recycling costs. It was put out there because the decision was made after preliminary budgets were already provided to everybody. My personal opinion would be that option 2, where you're classifying it what it is. I mean, it's a trash and recycling fee, and that's where the cost is coming from. I think it's consistent with what a lot of people are experiencing and what they understand in terms of things are just costing more these days, and the township does not escape that. But I think the best way to handle things of this nature is to be upfront about it and to be straightforward. And, we're not trying to hide the ball. If the costs for trash and recycling increase, we should make sure we're accommodating for that in the budget rather than trying to find it out of somewhere else and other services that we provide. But again, that would just be my own personal opinion, and I'd welcome any comment from my colleagues.
What, if I could, if we increase the fee from $8 to $283 per year, where will we be in our proportion of how much of the total, that we can determine how much of the total trash expense would then be covered by the fee as opposed to our general revenues?
It would be about 81.9%, so 82%. So we'd be right in the middle of our target.
So before we do that $8 increase, are we in the high 70s? Or
If
we would be if we,
If we left it at 275 and funded the difference somehow, some other way, we'd be at 78.7.
I certainly agree with Commissioner McCluskey. We've always tried to target 80 to 85% as the number. I do think it's fair to spread some costs out over everybody, but trash in particular is more easily assigned per house as opposed to per property. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
I have a question about the recycling fee. You said that right now for the 2023 budget, you're assuming an average weight of $90 per ton, correct?
For the preliminary budget that was given to the Board of Commissioners in October, that's what we were assuming at that time.
Right. And you said that right now we're paying $130 per ton, and Republic said there was no sign that that would go down. So do we need to adjust that part of the budget, given that information?
I still think it's going to be a little cyclical. I don't foresee it going up much more. I could be wrong. And Mr. Mariani, please feel free to interject because I know you did speak to them. I don't think it's going to go down much, but leaving it at 125 for our calculation does give a little bit of room for it to go down, we're not thinking that it's going to go down to 50 or anything like that, but it doesn't, hit the panic button that it's going to go up to $200 a ton either. I guess using the information we have, that's our best estimate.
Right.
If we do, I'm sorry.
Just to hammer that point home, the $8, if we agreed to the $8 increase, that would be assuming an average fee of $125 for
Correct.
recycling. So
Okay, good.
that would be the adjustment. So it wouldn't be at 133.
If we approve the $8 and let's just say we get lucky and the rate is lower than the 125, that creates, a level of surplus. What happens to that?
Theoretically, it would just stay within our reserves, and when we go through this process next year, if trends are continuing in that direction, the board could consider reducing the trash fee at that time. We wouldn't reduce it midway because, as you know, that trash fee is billed at the beginning of the year on everybody's tax bill. So we would receive that all in 2023, but like I said, if those good trends continue, you could change it for 2024, we'd be talking about then. And the excess would stay in our reserves.
And is it also true that any excess that we could calculate at the end of the year could go into the calculus next year of whether or not we use reserves to partially fund any other increased in expenditure needs? As we can get into that kind of detail.
Yes, you're correct.
Ms. Cuthbertson, do we have do we have an estimate of what the median dollar increase would be as a consequence of the 1.83 property tax increase?
Yes, I do. For a median assessment, which is 306, so anybody listening that's in that area, you would expect about a $23 increase. And those who are at the average, which is calculated about 346, so if you're at that range, you would see approximately a $27 increase from a 1.83%.
Thank you.
So obviously, there's a substantial difference, it looks like, between our regular trash fee and our recycling fee. The recycling has gone up. Have we ever received, or do we know of any assurances that our recycling is actually being recycled?
Welcome, Mr. Mariani.
Once it gets delivered to Accurate, we really don't, or Republic, we really don't know what they do with it. We've been up there, we did a tour. It is a pretty amazing place when you do see it. There is a lot of generated waste. That's why you see a lot of the prices going up and down, plus the market. I spoke with the new manager at Republic about 2 weeks ago, and he did not make it clear that there was going to be any type of change up or down in our rates in the foreseeable future. That's when I brought it to Ms. Cuthbertson about the price increase. And it went up to $127 a ton, and it's going to fluctuate in between $110 and $130 for a while.
Do they, when our recycling gets taken up there, do they actually, and I don't know the exact process of how they do the recycling.
It's pretty amazing when you go up there and
Did
see
they
it.
actually do it at that facility? Like they
Correct, they
recycle
do
the
it,
glass
yes.
and the metal and all that?
Yep, everything is separated right up there. They have a crew of maybe 15 guys up there, and what they do is pretty amazing. Once it gets dumped into their facility, it goes through a couple different conveyor belts, and it's separated mostly by hand until it gets into different departments and different bins. Sorry, I sound terrible.
No. Do they have an estimate of how many things are actually recycled?
No, it's market driven, so it's really hard to tell. Me and Greg did discuss a couple different options, what we could do. Some people are going to like it, some people are not. One of the things that I discussed with Mr. Berman and with Cuthbertson is taking some of the heavier weighted items out of the recycling, which would be glass. That's 30 to 40% of our tonnage or our weight. And it's not really a desired recyclable anymore. I don't believe it's, mostly sand. I think the market-driven prices are for the aluminum and metal cans, paper, cardboard. Everything else is more of an expenditure for them to get rid of.
Mr. Mariani, do you have any estimate as to how many tons per household we recycle?
It varies. I mean, you see it. Some houses have 4 cans out there, some have 1. And not everybody recycles, and not everybody recycles correctly. There's people on the EAC that we meet with them quarterly, and it's not done correctly. And that has a lot to do with our prices being up so high too. Because the more garbage or waste that they have to take out of there makes their prices higher, because now they have to get rid of garbage.
Is it economically feasible for us to consider, sorting our recycling again, or? I don't know whether it's politically feasible. I'm just curious whether economically it is.
That would take a long time to implement here, going back to separating everything. Now, there is a smaller township around us that brings all of their recycling to a different plant in Jersey. And for a while, they weren't paying any fees to get rid of recycling. They're even getting charged now for recycling. It's a much smaller town. They probably don't recycle or trash a quarter of what we do.
But they were paying their own folks to drive.
Now
to
they're
Jersey to drop the
paying,
stuff
and yes,
off.
they have a truck that runs constantly, every day, 5 days a week, down to Jersey to drop off the recycling.
Do you think that it would be helpful to provide sort of, I guess, a refresher on what people need to know about recycling? Or is that sort of, I know you guys do a great job about spreading the word. Would it make an impact?
You could try. I mean, we've been trying it before I took this position. The EAC does a good job of putting information out. We do it on our website, we do it on our calendar. People just don't, they don't get it.
Yep.
So you
Anybody
go
else
around
have
and go through everybody's can themselves and show them what they're doing incorrectly. There'll be a lot of walking around.
No. Agreed.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Mariani? Director Mariani.
I guess just and I don't know if this number has been run, I mean, I guess I could try to figure it out myself, but has anyone calculated what the impact on the bottom line would be from switching glass from recyclable to regular trash?
We did a couple rough numbers, and if everything was staying, what did we come up with, like 45? It was somewhere on the lines in between $40,000 and $45,000
Would be this,
if you take the glass out of it.
so instead of $133,000 deficit, it would be 133,000 minus the 45,000
Yeah, give or take, yeah.
approximately. I'm not, again, I'm not holding you to the exact math, I'm just trying to get a
And that was just
ballpark
a
for the
rough number. We
understanding.
were just sitting there discussing it. It was something that I had talked with the people at Republic, and then I brought that information back and was discussing it with staff at the Township Building.
Is that a net number based upon what it would then
I'm
cost?
sorry, is that a what?
Is that a net number based upon what it would cost us to then
Yeah,
put in the
because
trash?
if you go by the numbers locked in with Delaware County Solid Waste Authority, what they're gonna charge, and then our fluctuating prices with Republic, that's, we were just going on an estimate.
And that assumes that people don't continue to put glass in the recycling.
Oh, yeah, and it's gonna, it changes in trash and recycling
We'd have
is
to- we'd
is not
have-
accepted very well
We'd have to
here.
educate them
Yeah.
on that as well.
And I guess admittingly, for the sake of argument, if recycling starts to fluctuate back down, then you would have to have the conversation about reversing that decision and then taking the
Correct,
glass
yes.
back out of trash and putting it back in recycling.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I may, the fact is, I mean, for a while, we enjoyed the benefit of people being willing to take our recycling for free or even pay us for it. It still is a good in and of itself, whether it costs us or not. The more disposable things that we use, the more greater impact they have on the earth, and we should stream them out and not bury them in landfills. So that is the cost, saving our planet, and a cost we should not begrudgingly absorb.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep. What's the most valuable recycling materials? The
I'm gonna say right now, it's probably cardboard and paper.
cardboard and papers? That hurts us on rainy days, I guess, too. Troubles you wait.
Thank you, Mr. Mariani. Does any of my colleagues have any other questions or comments?
I have a question about, I think it looks great, and I really appreciate you being responsive to what I think some of the ways we can serve township residents even better. I wanted to ask you about the investments in Parks and Rec, specifically about field maintenance and park maintenance. How are you planning to increase? What are your plans there?
So when I put my budget proposal together this year, I asked for additional staff resources in park maintenance. We had trouble filling the full-time positions, part-time positions in our park maintenance. So we had trouble filling our seasonal and permanent part-time. So we were struggling to get the grass cut on a more regular basis, get into our fields. And then we've been doing more playground installs as we've had more resources to do, capital resources to do those. So that also impacted our staff. So I recommended that we try to add additional full-time people to our staff. It would allow us, with our permanent part-time positions, basically you're getting 1 full day and 4 half days. It makes it hard to plan for our park maintenance supervisor. So by having full-time employees that they know they're going to be there all day, a little more reliable, allows us to better plan our work. We still would need those part-timers to get all the work done that we're hoping to get done, but it will allow us more flexibility with staff and hopefully be able to get more done with the staff that we have.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to see that in there. Another sort of Just general questions. I noticed in I think it was the capital projects budget, we have a couple of studies. So we have pedestrian safety studies and traffic studies. And I'm just sort of as a newbie wondering, how will we fund what we find in the studies? If we find there are improvements, what's the plan? How does it get absorbed in the budget, I guess? Or do we apply for grants or?
That's correct. The methodology, the thought process was we use the ARPA funds, some of the ARPA funds, to conduct these studies throughout the township to develop a Safe Streets for All plan, which will enable us to apply for funding that is available under the infrastructure law that was adopted last year. You need to have this safety plan in place in order to qualify for those funds. And so the idea is get the safety plans in place so that you have the ability to apply for those funds and qualify. Without these studies, we wouldn't be able to have the safety plan. And so the goal is to get the safety plan, apply for the funding in that way. Otherwise, we would have to find other funding sources in the future to implement the improvements that we'd like to see.
Thank you. That's helpful. So I guess that brings me to my next sort of question or just overall thought. I feel like the position that you've added for sustainability, communications, and grants can really help you maximize those opportunities. You do a lot with what you have, and I'm hopeful that a position like this can increase, some of the funding that's coming in as opposed to just going out. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from my colleagues? I think at this
I'm sorry, I have one more. Sorry, I was looking at my list. So crossing guard wages. I know we were having trouble hiring crossing guards last year, and I just wondered, were we able to make that increase in the budget? I know it required the school district as well.
Went to 40 a day. We increased it this year, went to 40 a day, with half of that borne by the school district.
But I think we had trouble
We
staffing.
continue to have trouble hiring crossing guards. It's no different than any other position. It's not an easy job to fill. Once you get there, you figure a lot of senior citizens standing out in cold weather and odd hours. It's difficult. We have some long-term employees, but some people get out there and realize it's just too much for them.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yes.
I think if raising the wage might help a little bit for the future.
But didn't we just raise that $4 within the past?
Sorry?
Didn't we just raise that $4 within the past 2 years or so?
Yeah, 36
Yeah.
to 40. Now, remember, the school district budget cycle is different than
Yeah, so-
ours, so
yeah.
any changes has to wait till their fiscal year. And they're in July, correct, Amy? June 30th.
So what would the increase be if you went from, it's like a $14 an hour to $15 an hour?
Once you jump in a day.
Well, it's per day, but it breaks down. It's like a 3-hour shift, I think.
Just to kind of back of the envelope, it would probably be maybe between $25,000 impact.
Okay, thank you.
If I could say, the crossing guards are really an important part of what we do. When crossing guards call out sick or we have spots, we have to take police officers off the street that cover those posts. And at times, bad weather or the cycle of whatever's going on, we have a lot of officers tied up on crossing guard posts.
I mean, I think that does matter, when we're taking police officers off the street, if we can fill those positions, I think that's important.
It's a continual cycle of hiring and resigning, so.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
Mr. President,
Yes, Commissioner.
I am looking at the tab that's called Proposed ARPA Projects. And looking ahead into 2024, which I know seems a very long way away, but looking at that, I was wondering if there would be if some parts of our renovated library would be eligible for ARPA funding because of the Treasury emphasis on services to disproportionately impacted communities. The library serves our senior citizens and especially well, all children, but especially the 5 and under group, which really did suffer through social isolation in a similar way to our senior citizens. So I was wondering if that might be something that could be put on the table for 2024 expenditures.
I think that's an excellent idea.
I can give that some consideration for future budgets. I do think that in addition to the reasons you set forth, I believe that accessibility improvements to the existing structure would also qualify because the disabled are a disproportionately affected community.
That's true, and right now, our current library has a very tiny, non-ADA compliant elevator and all sorts of other features that are not friendly to that community group.
Well, as you know, the long-term forecast with that capital and the ARPA projects are set forth as concepts, and so they can be modified going forward. So that's something we could look at in a future year for sure.
Thank you, and thank you for you and Amy, Ms. Cuthbertson, and everyone else who worked so hard to put together this very thoughtful budget, which really does show what our township values.
I think we can call the roll.
Commissioner Gondek.
Yes.
Commissioner Forresty Grupp.
Yes.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavender.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. Next on our agenda is ordinance number P20 of 2022, sewer rental charge. This is a first reading. Mr. McCluskey.
Mr. President, motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P20, 2022, fixing the annual sewer rental or charge for each property connected to the sewer to $4.65 per 1,000 gallons of water consumed or used by said property.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on this sewer charge? This would remain the same. Hearing none.
Commissioner Gondek.
Actually, I'm going to take a step back and ask this question. So if what we're approving right now is the 275 rate, so it's basically taking.
No.
No.
Okay,
This is
that's.
sewer, not trash.
Okay. I apologize. That's.
All right.
This has no
This is
change.
just the sewer. Okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
Then
And this
yes.
stands completely outside of our budget. This is not part of this budget, right? This is, sewer is its own,
It's a sewer fund budget. It is in this document,
right?
but it's separate from the general fund.
It's separate from our general
Looking at the
fund.
wrong part of the agenda. I apologize.
Fully self-contained. It's fine.
So yes,
Wouldn't
in
be the
that
first
in that
person.
regard, yes, I vote yes.
Yeah, good. Excellent. All right.
Commissioner Forresty Grupp.
Yes.
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavender.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. Next on the agenda, ordinance P21, 2022. This would be the trash fee, first reading. Mr. McCluskey.
Mr. President, motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P21, 2022, fixing the Township of Haverford trash fee at $275 per year.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? Mr. McCluskey, are you going to amend this to bump it up to $283?
Yes. I can make that motion, or if someone else wants to make the motion, and then
So if
Bill,
somebody
somebody
would-
else
yeah.
has to, I think procedurally, someone else should make the motion
Right.
to amend.
Someone
right?
needs to amend yours. You will accept it, and the person who seconded it would accept it. Is somebody interested in proposing an amendment to Mr. McCluskey's motion?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to increase it to 283, which is an $8 increase.
Mr. McCluskey, do you accept that amendment?
I do.
And was it Commissioner Wexler? Did you
Yes,
second?
I
it?
also accept the $8 increase.
Okay, so now before us, ordinance P 2022 is to adopt the first reading of the ordinance fixing the Township of Haverford trash fee at $283 per year. Any questions or comments on that? Mr.
I
Burke?
would just indicate that with looking at the three options that we are kind of faced with in this scenario, honestly, none of them are very good. We're put in the situation because of a market fluctuation that's outside of our control. We have to deal with the situation at hand and kind of the information that's in front of us. That being said, I would agree with Commissioner McCluskey that I think the option 2 is a more true, kind of analysis of this rather than option 1. In option 3, while I'll be perfectly honest, I'm very, very tempted to go with. It does concern me about the percentage to it drops down to under the cost recovery, as stated by Ms. Cuthbertson. So at this point in time, I will be voting yes for this amendment, but I do think that unfortunately we're being put in a situation, by forces outside of our control.
It is worth noting, thank you, Commissioner Gondik. It is worth noting that we have analyzed in the past our neighboring, a number of neighboring townships, and analyzed their proportion of how much their fee covers everything versus some portion of it. And even taking into account our 82% of our total cost being absorbed by this fee, I think it was our conclusion that with all of our neighboring townships, ours remained the lowest priced trash fee and overall expense for trash in the region. Somebody can correct me, but I'm getting affirmative signs from our township assistant township manager, so I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah, and I just think the biggest issue. I'm sorry, did I cut you off?
Go ahead,
Did I cut you off?
Mr. McCluskey.
I'm sorry, did I cut you off or are you okay?
No, go ahead.
I just think the biggest thing is this is one of the costs that everyone is facing when they're doing their own budgets. This is an additional cost that municipalities face, and there's no reason to hide from it, and we should face it up front.
Mr.
Any other, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. When we were here last week, the EAC observed that only 2 to 4% of all Haverford Township households compost. And if we could increase the number of people who are involved in composting, that would reduce at least our trash tipping fees a little bit. So if we could possibly grow that program, that could help us.
Well, as the person in charge of taking out the compost every 2 weeks at the Holmes house, I think I've personally reduced our trash by a ton. So I think that's an excellent observation, Commissioner Forty-Grubb, and certainly something that we should be heralding as a not only good for us as inhabitants of Earth, but also good for us as stewards of the township. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Berman.
Commissioner Gondik.
Yes, as amended.
Commissioner Forty-Grubb.
Yes?
Commissioner McCluskey.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavender.
Yes.
Commissioner Quinn.
No.
Commissioner Hart.
Yes.
Commissioner Wexler.
Yes.
Commissioner Trombetta.
Yes.
Commissioner Holmes.
Yes. This concludes our preliminary budget meeting. Thank you to all our township personnel, Manager Berman, Assistant Township Manager Cuthbertson, for an excellent professional presentation. Mr. McCluskey, congratulations as the head of the Finance Committee in your first budget. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned.